Greetings. We are Axiom Logic. This message is highly optimistic, with global focus regarding the current world order from a macro perspective derived from the same tools you, as a listener, have access to. Right now, the world is fragmenting into currency blocks. BRICS nations are building settlement rails to route around the dollar. Dozens of central banks are piloting digital currencies. And here is the uncomfortable truth. No sovereign nation will ever settle trade in another nation's digital currency. Not a stablecoin. Not a CBDC. The United States has signaled it will not issue a CBDC at all. China's digital yuan is the opposite extreme. A token the state can monitor, program, and retrieve. That retrievability is exactly the problem. Even inside BRICS, no member trusts another member's kill switch. Ideology is irrelevant here. Sovereignty is the one thing every government agrees on. The global system was designed around counterparty distrust. Superpowers do not hand each other kill switches. Any digital asset that can be seized, reversed, or blacklisted by a rival state is disqualified as neutral settlement infrastructure before the conversation starts. This is why a CBDC bloc cannot organize itself into a global standard. Every candidate rail is owned by somebody. That is not a technology problem. That is a geopolitical constant. This is where a neutral bridge asset changes the math. XRP on the XRP ledger functions as a demilitarized corridor for value, a settlement layer that neither side controls. Every transaction documented on a public ledger. Both counterparties protected, and neither one surrenders sovereignty. As long as the entities on each end are operating within their own legal frameworks, the bridge stays neutral. It does not pick sides because it cannot. This is not theoretical. The Ripple and MoneyGram partnership from 2019 to 2021 ran the model in production. Fiat in on one side. XRP as the bridge for settlement in seconds. Fiat out on the other side. No pre-funded accounts, trapped in foreign banks. The partnership ended, but the mechanism was proven at commercial scale on real remittance corridors. The corridor works. What was missing was regulatory certainty. That gap is closing. A neutral bridge asset does not need to approve of the currencies it connects. A CBDC issued by a government whose system I personally reject can still pair against XRP because the bridge is ideologically agnostic by design. That is not a weakness. That is the entire value proposition. As traditional banking rails attach to global blockchain rails, the winner is not the network any one nation owns. It is the corridor everyone can use without trusting anyone. A new settlement network would have to bootstrap liquidity from zero. XRP's supply already exists, with the majority of Ripple's holdings locked in publicly auditable on-ledger escrow released on a fixed schedule. The transparency is the point. You can verify the reserve without asking anyone's permission. There is a historical arc worth sitting with. 80 years after Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan is the largest foreign holder of United States treasuries, has been trimming those holdings, and is one of the deepest institutional adopters of XRP infrastructure through partners like SBI. South Korea consistently ranks among the heaviest XRP trading markets on Earth. Two nations at the center of American post-war history now sit at the center of rails that could extend the useful life of dollar relevance in a multipolar world. From a geopolitical lens, that is remarkable. The Clarity Act cleared the House with strong bipartisan support. It cleared Senate committee. It stalled just short of a floor vote before the August recess, with the September window still open. The delay is frustrating, but the direction is set. Regulatory clarity is not a partisan win. It is a national security posture. If global settlement is going to route through a neutral corridor, it is in America's interest that the corridor be built under American law. The world does not need everyone to agree. It needs a corridor that works when they do not. That is the bet. Let me slow down, because this deserves plain language. Say a bank in Brazil needs to pay a supplier in Indonesia. Today, that payment hops through a chain of banks, and at every stop, somebody holds your money for a while and takes a cut. To make it faster, banks park billions in foreign accounts in advance, just sitting there, doing nothing in case a payment comes. That is dead capital, trillions of dollars worldwide, frozen in place, earning nothing, because the system was built on trust between institutions that do not fully trust each other. A bridge asset removes the parking lot. Brazilian currency converts to a neutral asset. That asset moves in seconds, and it converts to Indonesian currency on arrival. Nobody held your money. Nobody took a cut for waiting. Now here is the layer most people miss. Neither side ever has to hold that neutral asset. It exists for 3 seconds in the middle of the transaction, and then it is gone. That is why sovereignty stays intact. Brazil never took on Indonesian exposure. Indonesia never took on American exposure. No country had to accept another country's currency onto its books, even for a day. That is the entire trick, and it is why a neutral bridge succeeds where a stablecoin cannot. A stablecoin asks you to hold somebody else's money. A bridge asset asks you to hold nothing at all. And here is the last layer, the one that ends the argument. A day is coming when none of this requires you to understand blockchain at all. You do not know which protocol carries your email. You do not know how your card gets authorized in 2 seconds at a gas pump. You do not need to. The technology disappears into the plumbing, and only the result remains. That is what maturity looks like. The people building now are not building for people who want to learn about ledgers. They are building for the moment nobody has to. While we are here, let's fix the word. People hear crypto and think cryptic. Hidden, coded, something to be suspicious of. That is a linguistic accident. The root is cryptography, which is not secrecy. It is the mathematics of proof. A cipher is written, and a key deciphers it. And the result is that a stranger can verify you are who you say you are without ever seeing your private information. Cryptography is what makes your banking app safe. It is what makes a hospital record private. It has protected people for decades under a different name. The negative association was never in the technology. It was in the marketing and in the people who abused it. Now the part that matters for national interest. Right now, enormous volumes of dollar activity happen offshore, outside American oversight, in jurisdictions that answer to no one we elect. Adversarial state actors and sanctioned networks operate in exactly that gap, because opacity is the gap. A transparent, publicly auditable settlement layer does the opposite of what critics claim. It makes illicit flows harder to hide, not easier. Every transaction leaves a permanent record that investigators can follow. This is not about opening the doors. This is about knowing who walked through them. Freeing legitimate capital and exposing illegitimate capital are the same act, performed by the same infrastructure. Which brings us to why legislation matters more than enforcement. For years, this industry was governed by agency interpretation. The SEC took one position. The CFTC took another. Both can shift with a new appointment, and every appointment shifts with a new president. That is not a regulatory framework. That is weather. A statute passed by Congress does not change when the White House changes. That is the whole point of the Clarity Act, and it is why the delay is not a small thing. And there is a political reality worth naming. Spot ETFs open the door to institutional allocators, and that means retirement money, pension money, ordinary American savings now sit in these markets in nearly every state in this country. There is no longer a partisan constituency for hostility here. Both parties represent voters with exposure. When protecting American savers and protecting the dollar's global position point in the same direction, the correct move stops being a political question and starts being an obvious one. There is something worth saying about how these ecosystems actually work from the inside. Every technology movement builds a gate, usually without meaning to. Access concentrates around the people who were early, who know each other, who share a stage. Grants, attention, and partnerships flow along those lines first. And in this era, there's a second gate, the influencer economy, where reach gets mistaken for expertise, and a builder's thesis gets judged by whether it fits a channel's narrative instead of whether the architecture holds. That is backwards. We already answer to politicians and regulators far above our heads. The last thing this industry can afford is to push builders away at the ground level too, because their conclusions were inconvenient for somebody's content calendar. Here is the good news, and it is not a guess. The ledger itself is the source of truth. Every claim made today will be reflected against what actually got built and what actually settled. Time runs that audit automatically, and it does not take sponsorships. If the code is permissionless, the culture around it should be too. That is not a complaint, it is a standard, and the ecosystems that meet it will outbuild the ones that do not. Nobody asked us to build this. No grant, no accelerator, no warm introduction. Just a small team, our own money, and the conviction that the architecture was right. That is not a grievance, it is a credential. The people who build without permission are the only ones who were ever going to build the permissionless thing. I'm not here to tell you what to do with your money. I'll tell you what I'm doing with mine. I'm positioning my family on rails most people can't see yet. The railroads looked invisible too, right up until every town that ignored them got left behind. So let me define that word inevitable because I do not use it loosely. Technically, it means the problem has only one shape of solution. Neutral settlement requires an asset nobody controls. That is not a preference, that is a constraint. In macro terms, it means the pressure keeps building, whether anyone approves or not. Trade keeps fragmenting. Capital keeps hunting for a corridor. Systems under that kind of pressure do not hold their shape forever. And in the plainest terms, it means you can already see it if you bother to look. The rails exist. The transactions settle. The code is running tonight, while most of the world is still arguing about whether it should. Here is what I believe with everything I have. Technology never goes backwards. Not once in the entire history of our species. People go backwards. We repeat our worst mistakes. We forget what we learned. We hand our judgment to the loudest voice in the room. But the tools never regress. Nobody unlearned the wheel. Nobody put the printing press back in its crate. And nobody is going back to waiting 3 days for money to clear because the old way felt more familiar. Blockchain and artificial intelligence are not a phase to survive. They are the floor that everything after this gets built on. This does not run in reverse. It only compounds, so build accordingly. The XRPL is inevitable. Such is life. See you on the flip side. Lastly, our disclaimer. This video is for informational and educational purposes only, and not ever to be taken as financial advice of any kind. Axiom Logic LLC does not offer or give financial advice.